Hey guys, welcome back to another RestoreMySneakers.com video. In this episode, we're going to continue the midsole swap project for the Air Jordan 4 Retros. Again, we want to point out that these shoes are damaged, and that is why we are doing this project. If you happen to have a pair that's completely dead stock, completely 100% no cracking, I wouldn't suggest doing this project. I would just suggest you do this on pairs that are already damaged. Now, in this episode, we are going to separate the midsole with the sole attached from the upper. So what I'll be using to separate the upper from the midsole is a heat gun. Now, we already went over the details of this heat gun in one of our previous videos. This particular heat gun has an LCD screen that tells you what the temperature currently is, and it's also programmable, so I can control the temperature by 50-degree increments. The temperature that I'm going to be using is 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the reason why I'm using that temperature is because when I was separating the military blue 4s as a test run, 400 degrees Fahrenheit was the best temperature to work with, and actually the safest. Anything higher seemed to have caused shrinkage or warping in the leather uppers of the military blue 4s. And definitely with this shoe, since this is going to be transferred over onto the military blue 4s, we want to make sure that this upper does not shrink or warp in any shape. Turn on the heat gun. This particular heat gun has two heat settings. One is low and one is high, but it'll still use that temperature that you set it onto. So the temperature is currently at, should be going up. Alright, so it's at 400. And what I'm going to do is focus the heat on the midsole itself. You don't want to have the heat on the upper. So try to focus the heat on just this midsole, and as well as this part. And you want to get the back end of a knife and gently pry the midsole from the upper. If it doesn't show any separation, you'll have to keep using the heat on the midsole. It's literally melting this right here. Well, this side is... Are you recording? Well, this side is getting a little too hot, and I want to avoid that, so I'm going to move over to the other side and start to separate this side instead. Okay, starting to crack. The tag is kind of getting in the way, even with the tucked in. So I'm going to show you guys how to remove this without having to cut the plastic. When you look at this, there's actually 3 prongs that go like this. If you open up one and try to open up another one, you can actually slide this out without having to cut it, like I mentioned. And you can close it back up. That way it's out of the way. So I was trying to remove the midsole from the upper as cleanly as possible, but apparently it's starting to crack even more since the midsoles are deteriorating. And on this side right here, it actually started to bubble up. In that sense, it's more than likely that I'm going to have to start tearing up the midsole like I did with the black cements, since the midsoles are really deteriorated at this point. See, it's dried up inside. And the previous owner actually used Shugu, and I know it's Shugu just by the smell of it. And Shugu's really messy to deal with, especially if the midsole's dried up. So instead of trying to remove the upper from the midsole, I'm going to remove the sole from the midsole itself, since it seems to be much more easier to do that and then just carve away at the leftover midsole that's actually stuck on the upper. So in this sense, I would be heating up the rubber itself, and it should start to separate from the midsole. That takes us back to this side. So this is actually on top of midsole itself. So this part right here will actually separate from the midsole if I have the heat on there long enough. So right here there's another air unit. I want to make sure that I have that still intact, just for viewing purposes. Okay, so I have pretty much this whole portion separated from the midsole. Now I have to focus all my heat, the heat onto this part to get this separated, since the rubber portion is connected to the upper itself. So now that the majority of the shoe is separated, I'm going to heat up this portion, get it hot enough so that I can actually separate this from the upper completely. And if you haven't seen our previous video, these have been unstitched. If you didn't unstitch it, it's not going to come off. Keep in mind, you want to keep your time. You want to make sure you take your time. You don't want to rush it, because if you rush it, you'll end up ripping the leather when you try to pry the sole off. So I got a little bit of it lifted up, so that should help allow the heat get in there much easier. Okay, so alright, go on the other side, I guess. Yeah, this shit's recording right now. I say these are a lot more difficult to separate than the military blue 4s. Going? Yeah. So for the past 5-10 minutes, I've been going over this toe piece right here. A lot of heat. Trying to get it separated. Getting pretty close. Thing is, since the glue is so hot that it starts to adhere back to the rubber toe piece. So even if you pry, it sticks back on. There we go. So I have the upper separated from technically just the sole, since the midsole is still deteriorating. The air unit, the heel air unit, still stuck to the upper. The forefoot air unit is still attached to the sole. So the next part is to carve out all this leftover midsole from the sole and carve off the leftover midsole from the upper. So I have leftover midsole on the upper, and if you want to remove the rest of this, you're gonna have to apply heat using the heat gun towards all these portions right here. And you want to make sure you take your time breaking these off or gently removing these, because if you try to just like peel it off or whatever, you will have it'll be more than likely that you'll end up stripping the leather material, the top layer with the color, off the shoe, and you don't want that to happen. And with the sole, same thing, apply heat. With these portions right here where you can actually see the midsole layer still, you can that'll actually separate, and everything else you're gonna most likely have to use a knife to gently cut away or scrape off any excess midsole. Since it's dried up, that's most likely going to be the case. And a little note, when you are separating the midsole from the sole, make sure to pay attention to this area, and this area. The main reason is it's really thin on those flex points, and you can actually rip the sole itself. So make sure you pay attention to those parts of the shoe. That's about it for now. I'm gonna keep on working on these until I get all this cleaned up. In our next episode, we'll show you our results, and we'll show you how the military blue 4 midsole fits on top of the cement 4 sole, and how the cement 4s fit on top of the military blue 4 midsole. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to stay tuned for our next episode.